Happy New Year, Chair City Church. I'm so glad to see all of you here today. Really, come on. People said nobody would show up New Year's morning at 9 o'clock, but look at you. I am glad and comforted in many ways to be with you here today. So, if some of you might remember the TV shows, I guess kind of reality shows about fixing homes up. I think recently there's a Chip and Joanne show. Is that the one? And then before that, I think the first one might have been the one with Sears on a Sunday night. I forgot, but remember Move the Bus? Move that bus, going backward. Like, and it was good. I mean, they would take a house, a building, and take it from one condition and make it much better overall. And there was always that dramatic ending, no matter what it was, where, the family that you'd been connected to by then and people who lived in the house got to see, what was happening. Everybody's crying and hugging because the transformation of the property was a result of the renovation. And it's captivating because you see not only the property, but the people, and they're in one place, and then after an effort and a trust and a belief, you see them now landing in a much better place, and it kind of grabs you. Well, here we are at the very beginning of a new year, 2023. Usually I would say something like, well, 2022 is behind us, but it really, for me, and I don't know about you, it feels to me more like 2022 and 21 and 20 is behind me. It's like the last few years have been kind of a blur to me. In the midst of all that, we have always hoped, we've casted vision, and from the very beginning, and we didn't ever thought it would go on as long as it would, and the different dynamics and the twists and the turns. But one thing Christian and I, had said to one another, and I believe I communicated to you in different ways, if not directly, was we didn't want to come out on the other side of all that was going on the same way we were in the midst of the mess, right? We said, okay, Christian and I have a saying, God won't waste our pain. Yeah. And there are times when we are in the most deepest and difficult time, and we know we are deeply in pain, and we will say those words, God will not waste our pain. God is with us, and He is working through us right now. He's a God of restoration, yes? Yeah. And we believe that God would do something extraordinary in us and through us for His glory and our enjoyment. As that pandemic came upon us, and then the mess that transpired after that, and in the months and even the years that would come after that. First, we wanted to hold strong. If you remember, we're just going to hold strong. We're not going to overreact. We're going to hold strong and do what God has called us to do all these years. And second, we're going to protect relationships. And that's what we did. And I want to thank all of you for doing that these last few years. You held strong with us, and we've protected relationships with one another and within our community, and especially both of those together. We are closer, I believe, in many ways now, and we are certainly very, very close with our community. Not only our presence, but the depth of relationship is greater now with our community than it's ever been. I thank God for that. So now I believe we begin a new season. And I see 2023 being a year of restoration for Chair City Church. You see that word restoration has two meanings. The most common meaning is when you bring something back to its former condition. In some cases, exactly what it was. You see that with cars, with art, maybe even homes sometimes. But at times, that's not the meaning. Restoration has another meaning, and that's when you bring something to an improved condition. Like what you were seeing on those TV shows, right? Meaning those homes were brought back not to their original condition, nice, clean. No, they were brought back to a better place. In some cases, restoration means bringing something back to something it's never been, but what it always had the potential to be. Our Heavenly Father gives us this type of restoration. He promises us this type of restoration, and He has the power to see that promise through in our lives, in us and in our church. Yes, you and I are the church. I'm believing that 2023 for our church, individuals, our family, Chair City Church, is going to be a year of restoration, where we become greater than we ever were before. Where all that was existed for now. Again, the last few years, there have been significant upheaval in several areas of our lives and in our church. I think, I have a sense we're just settling in from it all. I know I am personally. So maybe this sermon's just for me. I believe in 2023, God wants us to step into that restoration process that He has for us. Now, I'm going to speak from Philippians chapter 1, verse 3 through 6. You're not going to see, you can just leave the logo on the screen. The AVO does not have my sermon. They're flying by the seat of their pants. I'm not bringing to you the sermon that I had worked on and prepared today. I just, for different reasons, some which might come to you, I've chosen to go in a different direction. Which for some reasons in the past this has happened on this day, the last day of the year. You know, maybe that's why some of you show up, because you're like, you never know what he's going to say on the last sermon of the year, right? But, you know, I appreciate you hanging in there with me. I will do my best not to be disjointed, to stay on track, and to be timely. But, yeah, here we go. Philippians chapter 1, verse 3 through 6. I thank my God every time I remember you, because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ. Paul says to the Philippians, you and I here today, from the first day until now, I'm confident that God began a good work in you, and He's going to finish it. He's going to complete it until the day when Jesus Christ returns. And from the very first day until now, see, there was a day when He began that work, and He's continuing that work in you. And it's going to keep going. And I, as I was sitting there worshiping, watching my lovely wife do what she does in such an incredible way, I said, you know, Dave, that's the whole work is restoration. Now, I haven't had time to flesh this out doctrinally or theologically, but I feel good enough just saying that. It's the whole work is a restoration, because the whole work continually brings us from one place to another, from a lesser place to a greater place, yes? You and I are in a work of restoration. He who began that work will keep it going and will do that work in you. It doesn't always seem that way. It doesn't always look that way. We've struggled in different ways the last few years. In the midst of the chaos and the crisis, it just might not seem like God has a plan, but He does have a plan, and His plan has peace and it has hope. And He's going to continue that plan in your life, in my life, and in our church in 2023. I deeply believe that. Yes. I have deeply, deeply passionate thoughts and a vision for this church in 2023. I do. I'm in awe of God and what He's done in these just what He's done from when we began it, just what He's done in my life, just what I think He's going to do in 2023. As we begin to step out and see restoration, not only in our lives, but in our community as well. As we seek to be considerate and kind to people around us, I'm believing and hoping that we could come alongside churches, some of those who are struggling. It's been my heart to do that for some time. I've been talking to those closest to me for about a year and a half now, that waiting and looking for the opportunity to just truly to come alongside and to bless our community and to show our community, you know, the love of Christ, yes? To glorify God in our community, to show them what a servant of Christ looks like, yes? I believe that, and to be part of that restoration process. Again, not bringing something back, something to what it was, but to see God work in even a greater way in that situation. Yes? So many organizations, entities, people in this community need restoration in their life. Do you hear me? May God work through His church, you and I, to see that happen in this area in 2023. Yes, will you pray with me about that? Will you begin to prepare yourself to step out into that restoration process? God uses our mess, the mess out there, the brokenness of this world. He uses that to bring restoration into our lives. I deeply believe that. That restoration process begins. Now, it's been a mess these last few years. Some of what's happened has caused some of you to seek God like you've never sought God before. Some of what's happened has caused some of you to really stop seeking God. Like, you won't kick the God thing to the curb, but you're just like, look, there's just no plan. This is chaos. This is crisis. I can't trust in anything anymore. I don't know what to expect. So I believe in God, but I don't trust in Him. And I don't really see any kind of a plan here. But He's working His restoration process in you and through you. He will carry this work on to the completion of when Jesus comes and returns to those who trust and believe in Him. Yes? Our God is a God of restoration. In 2023, He wants to do a great work of restoration in us. And He wants to begin that work, first and foremost, I believe, by restoring the soul. Wow. My prayer is that in 2023, God would do a work of restoration on my soul like something I've never seen before. I do think deeply that has begun already. In the fall and into the latter part of 2022, that work has begun. That I'm deeply believing that 2023 will see a work in my soul that really is just a culmination of something that began years ago. And now I'm going to begin to see, like when you see like when we were in the diner, there was a moment where we said, oh, wow, we're beginning to see what it looks like. It's not just like a crazy construction site anymore. We're beginning, because that's what it looks like sometimes, But God always had a plan. There was always a plan. And like that came out better than we ever thought it would, the diner, so will God's work in our life be more than we imagine, more than we can measure, and more than we ask for. To Him be the glory in Jesus Christ, yes, throughout all generations. Listen, let's see God to restore our soul. What does it look like for your soul to be restored? Each one of us, it might look a little different, but I invite you to settle in right now, pause, and think, and maybe you carry on this thought later on, but you begin it now. What does it look like for my soul to be restored in 2023? What does it look like for that process to begin? Has it begun? Has God mercifully and lovingly and wonderfully and powerfully begun to restore my soul? To bring restoration? It's been a hard time. It's been a hard time for churches these last few years. I've talked to so many pastors. Churches have closed. Churches have suffered. Families have been broken. I love the kingdom. I do. Christian and I give our life for the kingdom of God. It's an incredibly sad time, something like I've never seen before in my 20-something years since I've been around ministry. And for you and I, it's been difficult in many ways, but we've been so favored. We have been so favored in what God has done these last few years. I am so grateful to be your pastor. I'm so grateful to be part of what is going on here. I'm so grateful to play this role and part of this incredible community of Christ followers, to see things happen that continually beyond anything I ever imagined. I see no reason why that would stop. But to be here, to be your pastor, is such a privilege to me. I come from an incredible line of pastors. I do. I come from an extraordinary line of pastors. Most people could go their whole life and never have one. I've had 3 pastors. Most people will go their whole life and not have one pastor like any of the 3 that Chris and I have had. You'll very rarely hear me speak anything negatively about a pastor or minister. I don't want to go there. It's tough enough. My heart goes out. I totally understand why mistakes happen. There are failures. They fall short. Maybe some shouldn't have went in the first place. I get it. But I tell you, I know more than ever, and as the year go on more and more, I realize how blessed Christy and I were to have the pastors that we had in our lives, what they meant to us, the legacy they've given to us, and that we can carry on. This morning, Christy and I received a phone call, and we lost one of those pastors. It's just a lot of sorrow in my home right now. We love our pastors. This pastor, David Siriano, such an incredibly beautiful, wonderful man. Christy's pastor, perhaps at this time the pastor we're closest with. He's a beautiful man. Gave his life for the kingdom. Ran his race right to the end in such an incredible way. And we take this so seriously because of what we came from, how they ministered, and the legacy that we carry on. It is our life. We deeply love it, and we're so grateful to do that for you and to do that with you. And we believe deeply that the best is yet to come for all of us. Our time of restoration is at hand. God is going to do more in 2023 than we've ever imagined. That process has begun. Now, kicking out, I always like to inject some practicality in this, meaning, some clear, defined steps that you can take to give you traction. Because I'm not comfortable with the haze or too tired, man. Ambiguous stuff. If you opened up the email we sent out this past week, if not, do it. But what you're going to see, the way we've laid out this month, you've got the first Friday communion, you've got 21 days of prayer, and then you've got the night of worship. And all this, you would find some incredible ways to see your soul fed, to see your soul restored. I always say, never think and picture what this is. So this is, time of communion and prayer. You have a certain depiction of what you think it is. Yeah, I'm not interested in that. Or I don't know what I'll get from that. You're invoking your preferences on God's process because you can't imagine what God would have from you in that moment. This has been my time. Be careful when you do that. Or you're practicing your plan out in the faith. You're still in the faith, but you're practicing out in a way where you're slowing down, intervening the restoration process, what God has for you. 21 days of prayer. I mean, Karen Murphy does such an extraordinary work and effort with our 21 days of prayer. It is so filled with such rich nuggets. It is so well supported. It is such a great tool of discipleship for you. You could jump in on the YouVersion Bible app if you're a digital person and talk about the verses each day with people and pray with one another, or you could just read it. There are times we'll come together in here in person to pray. You can pray out there along with us at home. Either way, 21 days every day. There are times where we'll call for fasting. You don't have to. Meaning it's such a wonderful time to take 21 days to pause. Just pause. You get it? Just have some simplicity in your life. It's so busy, as I've been saying. There's so much distraction. Pause. I slowed down this last week. I just had this sense, Dave, just go into a slow mode. And I did. I slowed down this week. Just as we came right close to New Year's, something said, hey, you know what? Just spend time New Year's Eve with just you and Christy. It's true, I had like 20-something young people in my house to some extent, but aside from that, we can jive with that. We've hung with everybody. Often we'll have a lot of people New Year's Eve at my house, and something said, Dave, just slow it down, pause. Spend time with Christy tonight, just you and her. And we went out for dinner at like 9 o'clock at night. And we just sat there at 9 o'clock at night, having a nice Italian meal, talking to each other, and I just felt to just reflect on what God has done in our life. That's what we did. We went back to the very beginning. I just felt to do that. I had a sense to do that. Last night, we talked about our first New Year's together. We talked about what God has done in our life. I'm so glad I paused, because who would think we wake up early this morning and get a call that our pastor has passed away? And that we are deeply in sorrow. Please pray for Diane and Lloyd. This was their best friends. Diane and Lloyd are just weeping when we were with them. Weeping. So the power of pausing, the power of giving attention to our souls, the power of slowing everything else down, to carve out time to sit before God and acknowledge Him, and to see and to participate in the restoration process that He has begun in us. Are you hearing me? Begin to have that mindset in 2023. Jump into the time of First Friday, time of communion. The last communion Chris and I walked out of, we were blown away. We thought, wow, what a precious time. What a rich time. What a quality time. We were just so impressed. And I didn't do anything. The 21 days, and then the night of worship. Wow, just right now, put it on your calendar. I am going to go and I'm going to feed my soul. Right? You got two wolves, man, right? You got two wolves. You got evil, you got good. The one you feed is the one that's going to win. Feed your soul. You come out to that night of worship and you sing and you yell and you praise God and we pray and we thank God. It's such a beautiful time. It's like 50 minutes to an hour and we're just worshiping. It's like having 3 or 4 worship sets in one time. Such a beautiful time. And then the life groups are going to start up soon. And I've decided to take about 3 or 4 weeks before we go back to our groups, and I'm going to come out here once a week. I'm going to call you together for about 3 weeks, and I'm going to share something as a group. So we've done it before like this. This will be a little unique. I've been looking at a book called Tell No Lies. It's something powerful. I really do. I don't miss this one. I want to feed your soul right out of the gate in January. I'm going to take one night out of the week, every week, to come in here and to not preach, but the way I'll do it is I'll share a bit of what I glean into the group. You'll be at tables. You'll talk amongst questions I'll ask you. I'll come back, and we'll go at it from there. So participate in all of this as much as you can. Set aside time. Carve out time so that your soul could be nurtured, so that God, knowing that I'm going to give myself to the restoration work of God in my soul in 2023. Yes? Because God is going to do more than I've asked Him to do. He's going to, as I trust in Him, as I make myself available to Him, God is going to do more than I ever could have imagined. Yes? The process begins. You know, you never know what God is going to do. You never know the work that He has in mind to see through in your life. God's begun a plan. It's a lifetime plan. I remember, how old? I was 28 years old. That was the second time. There's 2 times that so many memories I had of what God has done in my life. There are these, I call them critical moments that you ever look back in life and you say, well, I could have went this way or that way, you know? And one of those moments was I was 22 years old, and maybe 23, 22 years old about. And about when I was 17, I've shared with you many times, I do it several times a year, out of passion and out of honor, about how one of these pastors I've talked to you about took me in off the street. Like I was displaced. I was displaced out there. And her and her husband, they took me in to live with them. Amazing. And during that time, I came to understand and be aware of Jesus. You know, I didn't grow up that way. You know, you went to church on Sunday a couple of times a year, a few times a year, and God and the whole Jesus thing, that was in that building and in that place. But when you left, it just didn't carry out. You know, that's how me and my family believed in God. You didn't have to do it that way. That's how we carried it out in our culture and our tradition. But now, with this pastor and her husband, man, the way they loved me and cared for me, the way they loved and cared for others, and what they were saying and doing lined up with what they were teaching, and this was Jesus, and it just penetrated me. It had an incredible impression on me. I became aware of Jesus, as I said. I was introduced. But as time gone on, I struggled emotionally, behaviorally, immensely, and eventually I succumbed to those emotional ills and mental ills and behavioral issues and, you know, other environmental problems that I had. And I tacked back to what I knew. We do that. We tack back to what we know. That's why you want to press on. Press on, because the enemy is going to draw you back to tack back to what you know. And now this moment comes. And I'm 22 years old, and I'm sitting at a table. It's a Sunday night. And I'm sitting at a table with about, 12 other men. And I'm talking to a guy that's on the right of me. And we're chatting. I'd never seen him at the table before. We got together at this table once a Sunday night, play cards and eat. It was the back of a restaurant called Tally's in Brooklyn, New York, in Bensonhurst. And at some point, the person who I do know well taps me, who's on my left side, the guy I'm talking to is on my right side, and he says, "Hey, Dave, don't get too friendly with this guy tonight, because they're going to whack him," which means they're going to kill him. And they did. The next day, it was brought to me that they had murdered him, they had killed him. And, most of the people in my culture and who I with would have sort of been somewhat tickled by that. Or, they had a front row seat to that, like there's somebody that they could, have that information or be part of it or be right around it, not close. To be in that environment would have been like, wow, But not me. I was deeply troubled. Which was very unusual. That is a normal response, absolutely. But I wasn't normal, and the way I lived wasn't normal, and the people I was with were not normal. But I was deeply troubled. Like I couldn't carry out my day. I couldn't push past it. And I was so good at doing that, just burying my conscience and just pushing past and doing what I felt I needed to do, what I had to do. And leaving my soul alone. But this day, I could hear my soul crying out. These are my words I'm describing now. That I like allowed my soul to live out loud in me. Like, man, this is wrong, Dave. There's something terribly wrong here, Dave. And of course, all that came from that pastor taking me in off the street and showing me and telling me of Jesus. I had this conscience. My soul had been awakened. My soul, that process, that good work that God had started now. And he was still working it out. Do you hear me? The work that God had started in me, he was now continuing. That restoration that he had begun was still going on. And I just said, I can't do this. And I then began to separate from that person, and not without severe ramifications, severe physical ramifications. And I was about 22 years old. I didn't have a come to Jesus moment. I just was troubled, and I kind of wandered for like months, in a crazy way. And then I settled in. And then at 28 years old, I have this moment where I get a call from these Christian friends, same church that my pastor pastored, same church where this pastor took me in to live with her and had me live with people in the church for 8 months. I've shared that with you, 9 months. They reach out to me, come visit us, I come. And you know the story, many of you do. I wound up seeing Christy, she's visiting there. We connect. We begin to talk. And sometime about maybe 2 months later, I have my next critical moment. And that is, you see, and somehow I want to tie this to being careful to depict things your way and seeing things what you think you can get out of them, and clearly creating images and understandings of what things are, like First Friday Communion, like doing this in church, like being a part of this. Be careful to just limiting it to your way of seeing it, because your way of seeing it has filters that you don't even know are there, and that are going to lend you to turn around and circumvent or delay or even avoid this restoration process God has for you. So now I go out to see this girl I've been talking to for 2 months. Totally forgot what she looked like on the phone. I did. All I knew is she looks like Jamie Lee Curtis. That's all I remember. In my mind, I like Jamie Lee Curtis, and you're better, by the way. And go out there. Plan was to take her out, hang out with her, and then go home. Through unforeseen but real circumstances, I get delayed, and now I'm there Sunday morning. Her family's going to church. Lloyd tells me, you don't got to go to church. And I haven't been to church since I'm in my early 20s. Because now, again, I know it happened at 22. I know that when I walked away from that group of people, that it was something within me, a force, something that was awakening me. I knew, I connected to it. It is this God thing. It is this Jesus thing. I get it. That's why I'm valuing life. That's why I'm uncomfortable with this. That's why I know this is wrong. That's why I know I could do better. It's this Jesus thing. And so I couldn't embrace it, and yet I couldn't dismiss it, but I went on to live my life. Not as hideous as I was, but certainly deplorable and depraved. And therefore, I wouldn't go to church. I would never walk into a church. No, I would not walk into any church. Like, no way am I walking in there. Just the level of uncomfort was so severe. And so here I am now, and her family invites me to go to church, and I'm thinking, okay, on one end, I'm so uncomfortable. On the other end, my Sicilian grandmother, if she knew that I stayed in these people's house while they went to church, the Scazziardo, she'd come out of the grave and kill me. Actually, she wasn't dead then, so she would have just flew up from Florida and killed me. So yeah, it would have been very disgraceful from where I come. So I went to church with them. It comes a second moment. And Pastor David Soriano, who passed away this morning, he's preaching. And thanks for hanging in there with me this morning. I'm just talking. The first thing was, and this isn't the moment, but is the communion that I've shared with you. I mean, I am like a fish out of water now. I am so uncomfortable sitting there, and they sit up front, which is just a terrible thing for me. And then Pastor David comes out there, and they bring the communion elements up. I'm like, oh, communion is all. And I don't really know much about it. It's been so long, but it's something formal, and I'm just uncomfortable. And he begins to talk about, they give out the elements, they hand out the bread, they hand out the grape juice. And then he begins to talk about, maybe if you're not well with God or you're not in the right place, and maybe it just isn't the best time for you to participate in this. And then they go and they start doing it. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm not going to do this. As it is, I got one foot in hell. I'm not going to jump in. I'm not going all the way. I'm not going to do this. And so I didn't. I think I turned to Christy's brother, I've told you, and I said, hey, do you want this? Do you want these, you want my bread? You want my wine? And he's like, no. When the ushers came around, I gave it back to them. And I embarrassed Christy's family. I did. But just, yeah. This is this place of turmoil I was in. And here's the thing. And then Pastor Dave goes to preach. Now, here's the thing, I got the Jesus thing. I got it figured out. Like you got communion, you got time of First Friday communion figured out. I got the Jesus thing figured out. I'm wrestling with it, I'm struggling with it, but I got the Jesus thing figured out. Like you got 21 days of prayer figured out and what it's like to, I got the Jesus thing figured out. Like you got night of worship, like you got serving, like you got giving, like you got it figured out. Hey, I got the Jesus thing figured out. I could do better, I could do worse. And then he starts preaching and he says, I want to ask you a question. Have I ever preached a message and you think I'm talking to you sometimes? All right. Well, then you know what I'm feeling in that moment, what I'm going to share. And he says, and the question was, do you know Jesus? Like, do you know Jesus? And somehow in that moment, it had to be a move of the Spirit. And just, maybe I was just caught by surprise. I was battling the whole struggling with being in church and the communion and trying to impress this girl, and I'm blowing it with her family and the whole, whatever it was, my filters were down, and I'm like, no, I don't. Here you are, mapping it all out, doing your thing, and you really don't know Jesus. You don't. And I walked out of church that day just with that realization that I did not know Jesus. I knew I wasn't following Jesus, but my thing was I believed there was a Jesus. I believed in God, and I knew the way I lived was in total opposition to that God and that Jesus. I got all that. I got that. But I knew something was happening in me, that this God was pursuing me, that it kept coming to me, and why was this happening over and over again in my life? Because God was continuing that restoration work in me. He loves you. He loves me. He pursues us. He inclines to us. He pulls us out of our miry pit of despair, and he sets our feet on a rock, and he gives us a new song to sing in our hearts, yes? And so, I left that day going back to Brooklyn realizing that I didn't know Jesus. And I was never the same. I was never the same. And I thank God for David Siriano and his wife Elsa. I thank God for David Siriano that he gave his life and he served our Lord so incredibly well that he'd be there in that moment preaching the way he did. He's a good preacher. He's a sincere man, an ethical man, a godly man, a man of character, a man of passion, a man of sacrifice, a man who loved God, that he would stand there, that kind of a person in front of me and tell it like it is and just look out and say, do you know Jesus? I thank God for him. And I'm so grateful for God and his love that he would have that moment for me. It's amazing how he does that, right? Like God just puts somebody before us and shares something, and our soul is awakening in us saying, that's for you. That's for you. And then the enemy comes in and he tries to snatch it away or suppress it. Put back in your filters in place. Put back in your depiction of things. Take back control. Hold, don't. But not that day. That day I just had this moment of self-awareness, which was rare, and sincerity within myself, another rarity. And I just said, man, I don't. By the time I got home, that 2-hour trip, I said to myself, maybe I should. Maybe I should. And such begun a journey that shortly afterwards would have me give my life to Jesus Christ. Yeah. And Pastor Virginia Impellizzeri, 17. And then later on, David Siriano there at 28 years old, standing there, giving his life, serving God, battling through difficulties in churches, sharing the gospel and putting it out there. Do you know Jesus? And my soul right there now connecting to that restoration process. So, do you know Jesus? Do you know Jesus? Do you know all the goodness he has for you? Do you know that He wants to continue that restoration process for you. Do you know that He puts people and situations and opportunities in your life continually? Like a First Friday communion, like a 21 days of prayer, like a J-term life group during the week, like opportunities to serve. All these are opportunities. Who would think that I would go that Sunday and hear that message and it would do that to me? Who would think that that would be a critical moment in my life that would tilt me in a journey that has me here today, that has me sitting last night in an Italian restaurant looking at this woman saying, how could this be? How could it be 29 years later from when we celebrated that first New Year's together? Who would ever think that our lives would be this? I said, this is just not even possible. And we reflected back on all the other people that were in that room, and we were just astonished, as we often are, like, how could this be? And I think over time, it's that we've shown up when we didn't expect much. I just want you to know. And I think that's what happened. Like, we've often shown up because it's the right thing to do. Do you ever do that? Like, it's just the right thing to do. We showed up because we felt it meant something for others and maybe not even us. We showed up because we thought, you know what, we think God is inclining us to do this. We crawled there, we stretched, but we showed up, and in all these moments, we were so much less prone to the distraction of the enemy in this world, and we were able now, by God's mercy, to see God drop nuggets into our lives when we least expected in such powerful ways, and all that aggregate and combined over the years is got us to where we are. Is that fair to say it that way? And these small nuggets is what filled in the gaps of these incredible giants of spirituality like Virginia Impellizzeri and David Siriano. David Siriano is a giant in the faith. He's an extraordinary minister. We are so blessed to have him. I hope I can pastor you as he pastored. I hope I can run my race as he ran his race. And I will continually have God use us to drop in these opportunities for you, to give you the opportunity to carve out time to restore your soul, to nurture your soul, to give your soul the opportunity to live loud within you. Because God's trying to say something to you. God is calling out to you. God is doing a work for you. He's continuing it. Let your soul be restored. Let me close this out. I hope I've stayed on one track with you. I have no idea what I'm going to say next service. I guess I'll try and say something along these lines. Maybe you're like me, I was years ago. You don't know Jesus out there online watching or in here. And maybe I could be to you what Pastor Dave was to me. Do you know Jesus? Would you consider the very reason you're hearing the message right now is that God is beginning a work in you? He's calling out to you. He's inclining to you. The God of the heavens is inclining to you and drawing you closer to him. He's awakening you of his presence. He's awakening your soul of what is most important, most meaningful, what most fulfilling right now. If you could just sit there and just imagine God's hand upon your heart, his arms around you, just calling out to you. Would you just sense the peace of that, the joy as you would picture his restoration in your life, not just bringing things to what you would consider an okay place, but making things better, more than you could ever have imagined, more than they could ever be. Do you know Jesus? God has brought you to this moment for you to ask yourself that question. And if you pause with me right now, you'll realize you have the answer in you. It is, I don't and I need to. I don't and I need to and I want to. So if you've come to that realization today that I want to know the Jesus who gave his life for me, died on the cross, so that my sins could be forgiven, meaning that the way I've lived out my life apart from God, when I was not connected to living out life for my soul, when I was not aware of this restoration process, when I had depicted and imagined things of spirituality to be one way when in fact they're another. But no more. I don't have to do that anymore. Now I come to Jesus to follow him. If this is you this morning, we want to know about it. We want to celebrate with you. We want to pray for you. And we want to just get you some good information to keep you going. So if you would, out there online, text one word, Chair City, to 97000. A form will pop up. If you're in here in person and you prefer digitally, you can look in front of you, the back of a seat. You will see a connection card. And if you scan that it says Chair City Post. If you would scan that Chair City postcard, that same connection card will pop up. Online in here, digitally, fill out the area where it asks you, have you begun a new relationship with Jesus? And then just send it in, and we will get you out a gift package in probably 2 or 3 days. If you came in today and you were handed a physical connection card, or you might see one in the back of a seat in front of you, fill out that card and bring it to the guest services table, and they will give you that package right here. And again, on that card, on one side, you could let us know, I've begun a relationship with Jesus. Man, today my soul will be well. I will feed my soul. I will come to Jesus. And if you've been kicking this Christian thing around for a long time, I use that term. It's a subtle way of saying, I've been living out Christianity from a perspective and a place that's kind of has a lot of limitations. Better than when I was, but so far from what God has for you. Well, today, God is going to restore your soul. God is restoring your soul. Today, renew your relationship with God with the intention and the desire to see your soul restored. Yes? Yeah. I love you. I'm so grateful for what I do. I'm so grateful for David Siriano, for his life. I look forward to pastoring you this next year with all my heart. I deeply believe that together we are better and that God will glorify himself with us. And when I say we are better together, we are better together. I want you to believe that. I want you to believe that God's called you to be a part of us, that everything you do has meaning. If you had my seat, if you had Chrissy's seat, Jim Karen, everything you do has meaning. It all adds up in such an extraordinary way. We are such a unique and special church. Do you understand that? Do you grasp that? That we are unique and we are special in every way, from our polity to our presence in this community. And God has been working through us. And now in 2023, this is going to be a time of restoration where God is going to work through each and every one of us. Individually, I am going to give all I can to see God work through your lives so that you would know him in a greater way than ever before in your marriages, in your family, spiritually, individually, and in this community. The best is yet to come. God bless.